Morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you all again. Today, we're going to talk about how to keep motivation going for people who are learning digital literacy. And I am hoping that you are, I know sometimes you're like behind a desk and you can't turn on your microphones, but I'm hoping you're able to maybe engage a little bit, at least with each other as we go through this, because I think this is I mean, I will have information to give to you, but I think it's also really important to start brainstorming about it and thinking about it as you bring it into your libraries. So I'm going to skip that. But I want us first to think about what prevents people from being motivated to learn digital literacy. Like, so you have these programs, you have maybe staff to help. What do you think? What are some barriers to learning digital literacy or for people to even take the time to do it? And you can either chat it out or you can either unmute or put it in the chat.
Um, Hello, Gitry Bank from Montclair Public Library in New Jersey.
Hello?
Um, yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about, and this has just been in the short time that I have transitioned to adult services and been helping with digital literacy stuff, is some of the patrons I speak to feel like the technology has advanced so far that it's like, why even try? Like, I'm just too far behind.
I think you're right. I think there's often a lot of fear that fear that just like you said, I'm not going to be able to learn this, like it's beyond me. And that holds a lot of people back. I do see something in it. Oh, okay. Any other any other thoughts about why someone might, what barriers to digital literacy or just literacy in general too, there might be for adults?
Hi, Tanisha Dixon here, Jersey City Public Library.
Hello.
I feel with the older generation, it just might be not actually having access to the technology or not feeling like they have the support at home to do it. So if they can't access the technology, they can't really practice. So they would have to, constantly come to the library. And I do see that sometimes with the older generation.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I mean, we all know that for digital equity, you have to have not only the skills, but the device and broadband as well, or some kind of internet. So it's much more difficult if you, and I think, as with anything, but especially digital literacy, really a lot of it is the practice. So the more you can
Yeah.
use the skill, yeah, that's a good point. All right. And in the chat, we have patrons are fearful of making mistakes or may not have the resources to stay updated. For sure, I run into a lot of people who are afraid of breaking the computer or of messing things up or, yeah, not knowing what to do and doing something drastically wrong. And so I think that is true. And then as we were talking about before, the resources to be able to use it, right? So what's the point of learning it if you can't ever use it? Um, and James, we were just talking about what are some barriers to digital literacy for people staying motivated to learn the skills. Any other thoughts? These are all great. All right. Well, I think some of the other things that we need to acknowledge are just life demands, right? So we all have things going on in our lives. We all have to make choices about how we spend our time. And if someone is working three jobs, they're to just get food on the table, they're most likely not going to have time or energy to learn digital skills. Transportation can be an issue too. So if you're hoping people are going to come into the library, but they don't have a way to get there, makes it more difficult. Health issues for anyone, but especially in the older population, it sometimes is difficult to, I mean, sometimes it takes all your energy just to deal with your health issues. If people don't have childcare, if a lot of times we see people kind of moving around a lot, and so they're kind of dealing with all that relocation. They might be helping family members. So a lot of times it's just life that so I should back up and say North Star is part of Literacy Minnesota, which is a nonprofit that's been around for over 50 years working with adults on literacy. And so a lot of times we'll see people come to class, and then drop out for a couple of weeks and then come back. And it's really because there's so much immediate needs going on in their lives that even though they may feel education is very important, there's just, I've got to take care of my children. Someone's sick. I've got to get food on the table. I mean, these are, necessities. So understanding that, I think, is just helpful. Even if you can't remove the barriers, it's helpful to, rather than be inside yourself frustrated, to understand that this person may be really doing the best that they can given the situation they have. And just recognizing that can be helpful. I have encountered many learners who have people who are very unsupportive and actively disencourage them from learning skills. Sometimes that is seen as trying to be better than the rest of the group. And so this is something that can, I was talking to a man who was saying that his friends were all kind of saying, wait, what are you learning computer skills for? You're trying to be better than us. You're trying to get a better job. Do you think you're smarter than we are? And so when he felt, we talked about this and said, is there anyone you feel in your community is going to support you as you learn these new things? And he finally felt that, kind of thinking about it, that his pastor would be a person that he could talk to about kind of the difficulty and just keeping him motivated and, through all that he was doing to keep going. So again, knowing that sometimes that's a situation that might be going on. For older people, they're often told they can't learn digital literacy, or, they're often made fun of by us that are younger, that they don't have the skills, or, oh, you don't get this, or, so even though the families may be supporting them, wanting them to learn the skills, there's still kind of that background. We don't know if you can do this. So kind of remembering that. And that, of course, would lead to poor self-confidence. And as we talked, as you all mentioned, that feeling of, I'm not going to be able to do this. I might break it. I might totally ruin this. I think another barrier is, kind of to the point of, if I don't have a device, or if I don't see the value of digital literacy, why would I want to learn it? And that can be another barrier. And I do often encounter organizations where they're promoting digital literacy as a way to get a better job. And a lot of times people will say, well, I don't want a job, or I don't need it, I don't want a different job. And so then there's that disconnect. But there's so many other reasons why digital literacy may help someone. So we have to make sure we're kind of thinking about what might that person's goals be, and kind of advertising it in that way. So as I say that, let's think about, if, let's say I'm a person who does not know how to turn on a computer, I don't know how to use a mouse, I don't know how to use email or search on the internet. What in life can't I do that other people can?
Go online shopping.
Right.
Or
Right.
purchase certain things. I mean, a lot of vendors are going online now.
exactly. And it makes it a lot easier too, right? If you don't have transportation or you don't have childcare to do online shopping. But if you don't know how to do it, then you can't. Yeah, what else?
And that's one of the things, like when you talked about like not seeing the value of digital literacy, where I tend to try to build those bridges between like, hey, this is not just necessary for a job. This is for things that, you know, could become a part of your everyday kind of routine, whether it be shopping or something like, you know, telehealth. I mean, this morning I just had 2 telehealth appointments myself, and I could see a world in which somebody trying to facilitate that and not having the time during the workday to, you know, go to all these appointments.
Right,
Another option is, you know, you bring the appointment to you via telehealth.
right, right. Yeah, I mean, telehealth is a great example. In fact, there's an organization here in Minnesota that goes into people's homes who, for whatever reason, can't, have a hard time leaving their home. And they bring in the computer, they bring in hotspots, and they teach people how to use telehealth so that they can do this. And I think this is more with people who have ongoing diagnoses where they're going to have to be talking to the doctor. But it's really helpful if some people are working jobs where they don't get time off, they don't get paid time off. So if they could do a telehealth appointment on their work break, much better for them than if they have to take a couple hours off to go drive to the doctor. And so that's a great point. And Andrea, yeah, I think, right now tax forms are usually online. So if you don't know how to get online, and almost all government forms these days are online. So if you don't know how to get online and how to fill out things online, it's much harder for you to get the services that you need from the government.
Paying your bills also, it's a lot
Right,
faster and quicker. So, that's important too.
right.
Paying
Yeah.
bills, banking,
Hmm.
a lot of financial things that, everyday people use.
Right, right. That
Yeah.
makes their lives much, much simpler, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I
Anything else
just
you can?
opened, this is like the banking thing just made me think of this. I opened a new checking account at Bank of America this week, and I had to have my phone because they were sending me things to sign digitally.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and a lot of times you need that extra code, that PIN code, verify
Right.
who you are. So, the cell phone is nowadays is essential if you want to do things electronically. So, that's the way technology is going. And I know they have a lot of free government agencies that provide free cell phones. So, that's one good thing that seems to be offered countrywide, is given those free cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
But the computer, the actual physical, laptop and desktop, that's where it's more restricted, and you see, not as many people as we would like to have those things at home and have access, so they can really get that full-on spread of using the technology. Because Excel and Word looks a lot different on a desktop than it does on a phone.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Excel on a phone is not fun.
Yeah.
Right, the two-factor authentication.
Yes.
A lot of things are going to that. Anything else you can think of that if I didn't have these skills, I couldn't do?
Mhm. I would say just the regular communication of just emails,
Mm-hmm.
sending email communications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
We
important.
Literacy Minnesota worked during the pandemic. We were part of a project that gave out computers and Wi-Fi hotspots, and then also did training on North Star for people. And we worked with some people who were over the age of 80 and taught them how to, basically do some basic computer skills, including Zoom. And they were so grateful because otherwise they were isolated. They had no way of talking to they could talk to their family over the phone, but it was so nice for them to be able to see their family by using Zoom,
Yeah.
communicate with the grandkids. So yes, and then email is definitely important for talking to your child's teacher. That's usually through email or through some
Mhm.
parent portal. talking now to your healthcare providers, often through email or through a healthcare portal, and emailing for job interviews or, you know, inquiries is also often by email. So very important. All right. So those are great examples. So these are things that as you're talking to people, and we'll talk about goals in a bit, but just people may not see the value just because they don't know what they are missing. And so kind of helping point that out by talking about what do they wish they could do faster or easy, you know, was easier, maybe a way to help them understand and see if that changes their decision. Okay. So the New England Literacy Resource Center did a really nice study, long-term study, of what keeps adults especially persisting in education. And they came up with 6 drivers of persistence that they found to be very important for keeping people coming back to class. What they also found, what we talked about, was you will have these perhaps gaps where people come for a while and then they kind of drop off, mostly due to those barriers we were talking about. But that doesn't mean they won't come back. So another thing that we want to shift our expectations to is, you know, it's not, adults aren't in a K-12 system where they kind of have to go. They're choosing to go, and other things might come, you know, get in the way. But if we establish some of these drivers of persistence and these connections, people, what the long-term studies show, people do come back. So also keeping that in mind, that for yourselves to not be discouraged if someone stops, that doesn't mean they won't come back at some point. Yeah, and then another example of why you'd want digital literacy is keeping track of state and federal benefits for sure. All right, so one of the drivers of persistence is stability. So people come in to your classes or your library or whoever they're working with, and they know what to expect, and they know how to act and how to learn and how, you know, the classes or whatever they're doing might be structured. So it's often helpful if you talk about those things. So let's think about how could we add in your situation, how can you add kind of that sense of stability where people know what to expect, and they feel like it will be the same each time? Any thoughts on that? So I was recently, where was I? Oh, I was recently on a trip to Belize, and on the trip, I went on several guided adventures. And the guides were really good about telling the group what to expect. So they would tell you what time we're going to meet, what time we were going to eat, what to bring, what was going to happen next. And so all these things helped people, you know, help prevent a lot of questions, but also help people feel like they knew what to expect, whether it was something they could do or not, and, you know, what to bring and feel comfortable. And they not only told you once, but they told you in writing, they told you in person, they told you multiple times along the way. So I think that for people who maybe were a little nervous or just not sure what this would be like, it helped people feel, you know, better just knowing what was going to happen. So that's one thing you can do at all points in the library, have people at the desk, if they're talking about your classes or your program, knowing what it is so they can explain it to people. They can tell them who to ask for help. They can tell them, you know, a little bit of what to expect from the program. And then as you have people who are actually maybe digital navigators or providing classes or what have you, again, just talking it through out loud. Because what happens is if you've done this a long time, you just sort of know what's going to happen, right? You're used to it. So again, on that same example, we were hiking through a cave system that was filled with water. And I'm not an expert caver, but I have done this before. And the guide was in front of me. We're a single line. He was telling me, watch out for a rock on your left, blah, blah, blah. We had to pass down the message down the line. And behind me was a woman who was kind of nervous and a little claustrophobic, had never done something like this before. So the guide told me what I needed to know, but I had some of the same knowledge he did in terms of how to maneuver in a cave, and I knew she didn't. So when I passed the information back to her, I added a lot more details about, this rock is slippery, this rock will move, blah, blah, etc. But it was not taking for granted that she knew these things. And that's the same thing in education, is to make sure that we're talking about, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to learn. A lot of people haven't had the opportunity to be in a formal education for a long time, or maybe they had bad experiences in formal education, or maybe they come from a different country where they were living in refugee camps, so again, even our Western style education can be very different for some people. So trying to stretch yourself to think about, how can I talk about this so people know what to expect and I'm not assuming that they know something. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is just a way that you can add a little more stability so people feel more comfortable, especially as you were saying, people might doubt their own ability to learn this information. At least knowing what to expect is going to help ease some of their fear. All right. Yeah, so there's a great comment in the chat to offer training in the same place at the same time in the same format. That's a really good point, especially about the format. It is very helpful to have a routine, which is why, in North Star, the lesson plans all look kind of the same and they follow the same format. That's helpful for the instructors, but also for the learners, because then they do know the cadence and kind of what to expect and feel more confident in maneuvering the lesson or the online learning. And that's not to say that you can't introduce any variety, but even the variety can be part of kind of a format, right? So you might be, okay, now here I'm going to show you something totally new at this time in the lesson or during the day. And of course, some people love that, but especially as people are starting to learn, they would much prefer to have that routine so they know what to expect. And it takes a layer off of that competency feeling. So if they know what to expect, then they're focused more on, okay, the content.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's true with the time. There's people who have, your own schedules, right? There's times when things work for you and there's times when it just won't work. So being able to schedule a time also can help people come like a regular time. If they know I always go on Tuesdays at 10, then they can often organize other things around that. And it just is kind of in the back of their minds, like this is that time in the day where I go, rather than kind of skipping all around or just coming when. I mean, Open Computer Lab is great, but encouraging people to say, we're open from, 10 to 2, what time works best for you to come and what day of the week, just to get in their own minds, this is the time of the day I'm going to come. Great ideas. All right. So another driver of persistence that they found was a sense of belonging, which kind of gets along the same lines, but it's more has to do with how people feel about their interactions with staff at the library. So if they feel that they're welcomed, if they feel that they are they're seen as worthy, if they feel they're seen as valuable, then they're going to feel that they belong there. And rather than, if someone is brusque with them or kind of like, oh, you should know this. Now, again, this goes to everyone they touch at the library, right? But even, which I'm sure is what the library would want anyway. But just keeping that in mind, that even as you are working with people, really helping people who may be nervous feel like, hey, this place is for you. And an example that kind of stuck with me was at one point I was a navigator helping people who were starting a GED prep class, so high school equivalency class. And there was a woman who was coming in, and we met beforehand, just the two of us. And she said that she was pretty nervous because she had tried many GED programs in the past, and they, hadn't worked for whatever reason. And so she was kind of down on herself, not sure that this was going to be a good fit, and nervous that the other people in the class would think she was stupid. So we talked about that the day of her first class. It was supposed to start at 9. And I said I'd be there to walk her and introduce her to the class, because it was an ongoing class. And she came about 9:45. And she came in, she's like, well, I'm probably too late to start the class. I said, no. We can go in, and I promise you people will be happy to meet you. And I had mentioned to the class that she was coming that day, starting that day. And so we went into the class, and I went with her, and the whole class was like kind of, said hello, and they gave her a round of applause for showing up. And she felt like, I belong here. This is a group of people who want me here. And that from then on, she came right on time every single day, and was working toward her GED. So that feeling of being welcomed and like, this is your place and people want you here, is really important. And I don't know if you all have any other ideas of how at your particular spots you could increase that sense of belonging.
One of the things that I try to do is, remembering names. Some people are better at that than others. I'm not always the greatest, but that's something that I try to do. Or like details that students might share that will kind of foster that sense of familiarity.
That's great. Like that, them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. I also don't remember names very well. In fact, I was talking to a woman at length, and then a month later I met her in the hallway, and she said, oh, hi, Teresa. I'm like, oh, I'm super impressed you remembered my name. And she said, well, that's my name too. And I did not remember that. So I admit that's not a strong suit of mine as well. So a lot of what helps making people feel that they belong or that they're welcomed is our attitudes, right? So just like you were saying, having that interest in someone enough to remember what they've told you, something individual about, and that attention, so that when especially you're talking to someone new, it's hard sometimes, but you don't want to be distracted by an email you're writing or something else you're thinking, but really giving that person your full attention and interest in them as a person. Another attitude that's really helpful is, flexibility. So understanding that we don't know what's all going on for every person. We don't know what they have going on in their lives, what might be happening. And so sometimes it's okay to, you might be annoyed with someone because they don't show up or something, but kind of giving them that grace and being a little flexible there. Also knowing that everyone else is different from us, so being respectful of those differences is helpful. And patience, I will say, especially I've heard from older people learning digital literacy, is the key. So they are I often hear people who say, thank you for taking the time and being so patient while I learn this. And I think that's true. We don't want anyone to feel rushed, like they have to learn all of this right now, or they're not learning it fast enough. But just knowing that with digital literacy, a lot of times it's all about repetition, and knowing that some people need more repetition than others is a good thing to keep in the back of our minds. So I want to talk a little bit about adult learners. I'm going to skip that last part. We'll talk about that later. But I wonder if here, this is what I want. So you mentioned it, but remembering someone's name and how to pronounce it is really valuable. And making sure, and that helps too for people who may come from a different culture than you, just so you're acknowledging that, you're trying to say their name correctly and getting to know them. We know that adults come with a lot of wisdom and knowledge already. It may not be around digital literacy, but they do have a lot of background knowledge that you can tap into and access to. You were talking about making those connections with people in terms of what they already know and what they might want to learn, or what they are going to learn. That can be really helpful. Make sure that they know, someone mentioned that people were afraid of making mistakes. Make sure they know that mistakes are actually part of the learning process. And that's, especially in digital literacy, often how we learn. So if you can impart to people that it's okay to try things and test things out, even if you don't know what you're doing, that's often the way that, especially like younger people these days, that's how they learn all the computer stuff. They just do it, and they just try it until they figure it out. So making the mistakes is something that is kind of essential to learning digital literacy skills. And if you can tell them about a mistake you made, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that everyone is learning digital literacy, because it's changing so fast. It's lifelong learning. And so we're all in the process of learning something new around digital literacy. And that's important to impart too, that, especially to your point, I think, Tanisha, you were saying that people feel like they'll never be able to catch up. It's constantly changing. So in some ways, we're kind of all in the same boat. And to make sure that people realize that. Yeah, for all things librarian, exactly. Another thing that's helpful is to check in at the end of your time with someone, just to see, like, how are you feeling about what you've learned? What would you like to still learn? What would you like to know? What was difficult? Just kind of checking in with them to give them a chance to express how they're feeling can be really helpful for adults. And then being an active listener. So you may have heard the term active listening, which means that you are, well, one, paying attention to what someone's saying without trying to think of what you're going to say. But two, maybe questions you ask are more open-ended. So what did you think about the lesson is more open-ended than did you like the lesson? So a closed-ended question would be something that someone can answer with a yes or no. But having something where they might have to expand on it can be very helpful for adults to feel like, they're important and their views are important. Yes, I think personal anecdotes do help in general, especially as it relates to, again, if you can say, yeah, I was trying to learn this in Word and it took me 5 times of doing something wrong before I finally got it right. That can normalize this process of of trial and error in digital literacy. Great. Okay. So the last three drivers of persistence all kind of revolve around goals, really. And I was going to break them all three out, but then I thought, I think it makes more sense to talk about them as a group. So the fourth one is clarity of purpose, or maybe this is the third. Anyway, that is clarity of purpose. And that is that there is a proven relationship between having goals and being persistent. So if you know why you are learning something, and if it helps you meet a goal, you're more likely to persist at it, right? So for example, if you're going to be going to Spain for a month, you're more likely to learn Spanish than if you're just thinking, oh, it'd be fun to learn Spanish. So having some kind of goal can really help with people persisting. However, a lot of times people don't know what their goals are, or they haven't thought about it yet. And again, I remember talking to someone who we were talking about their goals, and he said to me, "You mean I get to decide what I want to learn?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And he said, "No one's ever let me do that before." And it was just a kind of a new concept for him. So it may be that, as you're talking to people about what they want to learn or why they want to learn it, formalize it, kind of saying out loud, well, what are your goals around this? How would this help your life? How would this make your life easier or better? Yes, and in the chat, I see some questions about, do you have any questions? Which some people will be like, no, or, maybe ask, what questions do you have? So then they're kind of forced to think more about an actual answer. Good idea. All right, so just trying to close my chat here. So once they have their purpose and their goal, then the second driver of persistence is this feeling of being competent and kind of self-efficacy. So they have a goal, and then if they believe that they can meet this goal and learn new things, they're more likely to be persistent. So like you said, they might have a goal to learn computers, but feel like, I'm never going to be able to learn it. And so then they're much more likely just to drop out right away, because in their minds, what's the point, right? So we want to help people realize their goals and help us realize people's goals as well, so we're being effective. And also then give them the encouragement to feel like they can meet those goals. And then the last goal related one is relevance. So they want to connect what they're learning to their goals. And oftentimes it's really helpful for instructors to let people know that, right? So even though we think that people will see it, they don't always see it, because maybe they're kind of lost in the weeds of trying to learn this new information and thinking about that, and not connecting to how will this help me meet that larger goal. So by explicitly saying that out loud, we can help them. Or you can even ask that question. So how do you think learning this will help you meet your goal? And get them to think along those lines with you. Can be really helpful. So getting at someone's goal, you first kind of want to get at, well, why do they want to learn digital literacy? What is the meaning for them? And I will say that oftentimes in the past, I've thought, about, this is why someone would want to learn this. And when I ask them, their answer is completely different than what I had ever thought of. So realizing that no one can know everyone else's goals, and asking is just really important. And that's going to build that sense of belonging and that sense of connection with you as well, because people are feeling like you care what their goals are. I think too, talking about, you know, how will this improve your life, or what is it in your life you want to improve? And then it's important to talk to people about what they, especially if you're sensing like hesitation or fear, what is difficult for them? Why do they think meeting this goal will be difficult? And that might seem counterintuitive, but it's going to help people identify what the barriers might be ahead of time, so they can maybe better anticipate what those might be, and then perhaps prevent them. I think it's important to say, you know, ask people, how do they prefer to learn? You know, would you like me to help do this one-on-one with you? Would you, if you have a class, would you prefer a class? Do you like to do this on your own? Doesn't mean that they're pigeonholed into that, but it gives them a sense of where they might want to start. Getting a start date is important. And then having some way of knowing they will accomplish the goal is also helpful, which in North Star can be that I passed this assessment, for example. What else? You all work with people a lot. Any other thoughts you have around helping people set a goal, or examples you've had of that happening? Okay. Well, if we have time, maybe we'll do some little practice about just talking to people about their goals. All right, so the last of the 6 drivers of persistence is agency. And this is the belief that a human person has that they can make things happen through their actions, so that they can affect a change. And in this case, it usually means, you know, that they're going to be able to learn something. And I will say that adults in general are pretty hard on themselves. They often don't see when they're learning new things. They often will downplay what they're learning or themselves. So how can we, any thoughts about what we can do to help people see that they do have agency, or that they are, you know, putting time and effort into things and actually learning?
I typically just try to highlight the fact that they even chose to come sit down and even, you know, follow through with an assessment and continue to come back for classes. Because that was all, you know, and none of it was compulsory. It was all through, you know, they chose to engage with me. They chose to set appointments. And so I talk about how they are already in those instances, they're already acting on this agency.
Yeah, that's a great example. I go to an exercise class where the teacher will always say, all right, you've accomplished the biggest part, which was getting here, and now you're here. And so I think that there is a lot of value in, of all the things you could be doing today, you chose to come back to this class. So that's great to point that out. Any other thoughts about how you can help people see that their actions are, that they have the agency and they can learn new things?
And I don't know, this is directly, I mean, there's a correlation with agency in that having them realize like they actually know more than they thought they did. right? So
Mhm.
it encourages them to kind of increase that threshold or add on to that knowledge.
Yeah, that's great to kind of they may come in feeling like they don't know anything, and then you can point out, well, actually, you know X, Y, and Z. That's great. And I see in the chat, recognize and re-recognize their commitment and successes. You can never have too much encouragement. And that is also true to kind of point out the small victories to help people. So I was once working with a woman who was learning some, this was not digital literacy, but studying for a very difficult test. And the test was written at a college level, and she was at an intermediate English level. So it was difficult. And she liked to learn by practicing out loud, you know, reading the practice questions, and then she and I reading the practice questions and then answering them. Well, during the a couple of months that we were doing this, I noticed that although this wasn't her goal, I noticed that her reading comprehension and her pronunciation were improving just by reading out loud. And so I kind of really without thinking just said, you know, wow, your English pronunciation is getting so much better. And she kind of stopped and looked at me, and then in the next minute it got even better because she believed in herself. And I was thinking to myself, why didn't I say that a long time ago? But it's great to point out these things, especially and on an ongoing basis, like you were saying. Um, yeah, like exactly, like reminding them what they accomplished during the lesson or practice. So when you came in, you didn't know how to right click on the mouse, and now you do. And that can be, and by you pointing it out and saying it, it makes it more kind of important, you know, like it's recognition worthy. That's great. Okay. So another thing that we can do to help, these letters are really big. Another thing we can do to help promote self-reflection is, or to help promote agency is to ask these open-ended questions kind of self-reflection. So asking the person, so what can you do now that you couldn't do before? And that helps them kind of cement in their mind, especially as you were saying at the end of the lesson, what did I learn today? What was my time spent doing, right? Another one would be, what digital literacy skills am I good at? And even if you kind of have them write that down when they first start coming, and then, you know, check it after a few times, and they can see the difference of, oh, here, that when I first started, this was what I was good at, and now I can have learned these things. I think it's important you talked about celebrating those small victories with the learner, but also having them think about what are the small wins, and how are they gonna, you know, celebrate or talk about it with their friends and family or be excited. So maybe they learn email and they're going to email someone in their family that they can do this. I remember working with a man, he was learning the social media module, and he was so excited when I saw him the next time, and he said, I learned how to post pictures on Facebook, and so I sent out a picture of my North Star certificate. And so like that was his way of celebrating his win. And then you can also ask if you know want, and people, they can either verbally give you the self-reflection, or you can just give them these questions to think about or write about, whatever works best for you and them. But how does celebrating that feel? How do I feel now that I know this? And some people may say satisfied, some people might say excited, some people might say I want to learn more. You know, it's interesting to see the different responses that people give. But these can all be ways of helping promote someone's feeling of agency. All right, any other comments or thoughts? Okay. All right, so by keeping the dream alive, keeping people motivated, it's helpful to set short-term objectives. So if the objective is I'm going to pass all 15 North Star assessments, I mean that's a big goal. That may be the ultimate goal, but then you want to set smaller goals. So maybe it's if I got I don't know, 20% on the basic computer module, maybe it's the next time I see my score improve over 50%, so setting kind of meaningful but short-term objectives and celebrating those. So maybe I've told you this story before, but I did hear from a learner who was in California and she went into one of the California public libraries. She took her first assessment, which I think was basic computer, got like a 23%, and worked with the librarian for a couple of weeks, and then took it again and got, I think, a 68% or something like that. She hadn't passed, but she was so excited that she had tripled her knowledge that she asked the librarian to email me her picture and her story and said, this will change my life. So she was able to see that even though she hadn't passed the assessment yet, she was in her mind, and true, she had tripled her knowledge, and that was a huge win. So, and then they kind of celebrated it by sharing the information. Keep on motivating. It's okay to say, because it's true, this can get hard and sometimes it takes a while, some practice to do this, but you've learned this much already. So I know that we can figure a way out for you to learn this. One librarian who I was talking to who worked with adult students said that she would always say, how'd she put it? That the assessment was a way for her as the instructor to make sure she did her job, and that her job was to find a way to teach the material so the person understood it. So it was kind of taking it off the student, like this, it wasn't that the student couldn't learn or wasn't good enough. It was that she hadn't done her job yet. And that she said that really resonated with people and really helped them feel more comfortable about and reduce that kind of anxiety and fear. Yeah, I think that there's a good point in the chat that stressing increased percentages may be better than saying X% is a pass. So I think, it's great to pass the assessment and get the certificate, and that makes people feel good. But I think that, again, talking about this is a great way for us to see how much you're learning and these new skills, whether or not you pass, you're still learning. And so that's helpful. So thanks for sharing that. I would say too, to make sure occasionally you talk about that initial goal. See how do people feel they're progressing toward it. Is it still the goal? Is there a different goal? Because as we go through life, sometimes our goals might change. So, and then revising that as is necessary. All right. And as we were just talking about in the chat, you also want to measure progress, not just in outcomes, but in their effort and attitude. So you can say, if someone is having a hard time learning a new concept, you can say, I can see that you are trying really hard on this and that it's a difficult topic, but your attitude toward it and your effort toward it are gonna ultimately will get there. So just kind of recognizing that not everything comes easy to everyone. And so it's also a matter of trying. And then if you have success stories, sharing them, because that's really motivating for learners to hear that other people were in the same situation, or maybe even more of a difficult situation. I mean, you can keep names private if you need to, but it is really helpful to hear. I will say that I get invited to this graduation of workers who are, I think, over 55, who are going back into the workforce. It's virtual, and everyone talks about their kind of experience learning these skills. And one woman said something like, it makes, she talked about where she came in, the struggle she had, how she worked with her digital navigator, how she passed the assessments. And then she said, it makes people like us, it shows everyone that people like us are still important. And like, that was so great for me to hear how she defines success. And I think it was for all the people on the camera, that really resonated with them. So sharing those success stories are wonderful. Yeah, right. They did this, you can too. Exactly. Any so in the chat, lots of success with helping people apply for unemployment benefits and finding jobs. Right. And that can be really great for people to know that these things have helped. Do you all have any other good success stories that you've had? Sometimes helps to share amongst yourselves.
I just started my role, so I don't have a whole bunch yet. I'm looking forward to sharing some. I will say, I think we talked about this, like celebrating that incremental progress, right?
Mhm.
Counting those as successes. So that's been my experience thus far.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's good too, to say, one success was that people came back. And so as you're talking to other students, say, well, I know that this is maybe daunting or difficult, but I know that people have felt the same way, and they have come back and then gone on to learn X, Y, and Z. So that can be a a good example of sharing a small success that people can relate to. Um, yes. So with bilingual parents learning to use computers to help their kids transition. So talking about that challenge, right? So you're not only maybe navigating learning digital literacy, but also maybe in another language, which which can be, daunting. Um, and so, and I like that part too, about their goal was to help their kids, right? So the goal wasn't, and that's a powerful motivator actually for many, if any of your parents, being able to help your kids. Or even, I was talking to several people who had grandkids, and they were in a GED class, and they said they were finally wanting to get their GED because they wanted to show their grandkids the importance of education. And they said, if we can do it, then they can stay in school, kind of was the philosophy. So I think that's a great story. I think that's true. In the chat, saying that's a really good question, encourages others to be confident. Right. As an instructor, you want questions, you want people to voice what they're thinking, because you don't want people to go away feeling like they don't understand, or they don't know, or even with the wrong information, perhaps. But I sometimes do a webinar that's like we have a free webinar every month, and usually someone else does it, but sometimes I'll do it. And oftentimes there's a couple hundred people, and we'll get the same questions kind of over and over. But it's never bad, because that repetition is good for people to hear and to help them understand. And so I'm always thankful that people are asking the questions, because otherwise they're leaving not understanding. And that's not what I want my job to be, is to have someone leave and not understand. And I think it's great to encourage that. And again, adults come with a lot of wisdom, a lot of experience, and so they may have things that we can learn from, right? And that's the joy, I think, of working with people, is not only you're helping them or instructing them, but you're also learning from them. And that's kind of what definitely keeps me excited about this job that I'm doing, and helps you become better at what you're doing. All right, great. So one thing I wanted to talk about when you're working with adults is kind of expectations, that just so that I've heard from people, like digital navigators, that sometimes at the end of the day, you feel like drained, or what did I actually do? Or this is kind of hard, and it is. But that doesn't mean you're not making a difference. That doesn't mean that people don't appreciate you, and that doesn't mean people aren't learning. So I think it's helpful sometimes, it's helpful for us as educators to have these expectations ourselves. And one is that a lot of times, especially if people are feeling anxious about the material, you'll hear a lot of like negative self-talk and low confidence. Like, I'll never be able to learn this. I'm just too old or too stupid or too dumb to understand this information. And sadly, some people have been told that through their educational history. And so it's not even coming from them, it's from what they've heard. So that's been ingrained. And so we often hear that. Now, one thing, so I do have a counseling background, but I won't ask you to be counselors. But one thing you can kind of do to counteract that a bit is just to, you're not going to challenge someone on their negative self-talk, but you can talk about it in positive ways. So, I see you're a smart person. I think you can learn this. Or you seem very curious. That's going to be a helpful skill. And, just kind of helping them see themselves in a positive light, in a conversational way, can help a lot. And again, like I said, many people have had really negative experiences in K-12, with teachers who said really not nice things. And so having someone who's encouraging, lifting them up, seeing the promise is the word that comes to mind, but in them, can help cement that relationship, and also increase, people trust in you, your people's trust in you, and wanting to come back. Like we talked about, a lot of them will fear computers or their ability to learn about computers. What's a really nice thing about working with other people, which I'm sure you've all experienced, is you get to understand the world that others live in more fully. So we all kind of live in our own world, but it's really interesting if you open yourself up to it, to understand what other people's worlds are like, and kind of what they've maybe gone through. I am always awed by the barriers that learners do overcome. We at Literacy Minnesota, we have several schools here that we're working with adults who are refugees and immigrants. And some people have had to overcome amazing obstacles to get to where they are. And they still are excited to learn, and excited to come. And it just kind of makes me think, if I was in that situation, would I be the same way? Would I have this much stamina and courage? And so it gives me a lot of, I feel that it gives me a lot of respect and awe for what people continue to do to learn this new information. And so that's one thing that kind of, in those days when you feel like, am I really doing anything? That kind of helps me just realize that at least I'm gaining a better understanding of the world. For those of you who've been doing this work for a while, I expect that with some learners, you've made meaningful connections and you feel that, there is that trust between you. Don't doubt that you are life-changing. In fact, again, in the research, it was showing that people would drop out for whatever reason, and then they would come back. And the reason they came back was because they felt that the connection they had, what they were learning, had improved their lives, had made their lives better. And so even though you might not see it in the moment, you might not feel it, even ever know, you are doing very valuable work, and you will make a difference. Anything, yeah, I think that's true. Mutual respect in the chat, mutual respect, you for teaching, them for learning and overcoming those barriers. It's a partnership. And thinking about it as a partnership is a great way to go about it. And will help people feel that connection. Anything else that you've experienced in terms of, working for a while and thinking, oh yeah, this is what I've seen, or if I was talking to someone new, this is what I would tell them to expect? Yeah. All right. I think that might be, yeah, last slide. All right. So another part of all of this is, keeping people persisting. But then there's the kind of prior to that, which is getting people interested and getting people to come, and kind of making sure people know about your services and what you're offering and why they might want to do that. So I'm curious to hear about how at your library you're promoting what you provide, what you found to be successful, what you found to be not successful. I think that helps for us to kind of share that in this group. So is there any promotion or outreach that you've done that you felt either worked or did not work? Or any groups of people you see that are coming in or not coming in?
So in my, like I said, somewhat limited experience, I've noticed that where North Star in particular is beneficial is for my community of folks who are, the senior community. And something that I would like to work on, which is I'm actually interested in hearing what other folks have to say, is really boosting the visibility of the platform and program itself. Because when I look at like my library's numbers in terms of usage, it's not very high, especially for as big of a library as we are. So I really just kind of in starting in my information / digital literacy role, for me, I've been trying to figure out like that piece of the puzzle, like how do I make this more visible and also kind of promote the usage of this platform, and and others to promote literacy of digital literacy and literacy of other kinds.
Well, I think that's a great question. So let's spend some time brainstorming, like how, even if you haven't done it, what are some ways, let's say you had unlimited time and money. What are, which I know you don't, but what are some ways that, let's take the senior population just as a exercise, that you could maybe generate more traffic into the library for whatever kind of literacy? Any thoughts about?
Something that kind of came to mind for me was actually through other events that I guess we have that are geared toward that community. We started doing something, I believe it started the last weekend or the last Friday of January, if I'm not mistaken, something called Senior Friday. And it dawned on me like, hey, I can use Senior Friday perhaps as a day to maybe set up shop and have like very brief like tech help sessions, or have kind of info sessions with regard to some of the stuff that I am working on and some of the services that I can offer.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to think about, and in the chat, mention YMCA, or think about where would this population be, potentially hanging out, or reaching out to churches is another really great idea, religious institutions. And I like your idea too of making it a small, initially small, like, do you want to prevent email fraud, or, something like that, someone might catch someone's eye. Do you want to learn how to do online shopping, or whatever it might be? How to do telehealth. Those are, again, thinking about the goals, perhaps, of the people, that the population you're trying to encourage to come, being where they're at. In the respect to like the churches, it's also really helpful if you can find a champion in the community. So the more it's not you saying it, but it's people that community already knows and trusts, the better off you're going to be. So if there's someone at the pastor, priest, whatever, rabbi, whatever, who's going to help spread that message and talk about the fact that you have these things and why it might be helpful, and maybe even for the church, maybe to look at the online calendar or whatever it would be. That's going to be helpful. Or at the YMCA, hey, we can help you. At the library, they can help you check the classes out online and see what times they're at and how to sign up. That would be helpful. And I have seen oftentimes in communities, there was a library in Texas who started using the Spanish language version of North Star. And the first class, they had a really hard time getting, I think, even 6 people. Very difficult time. Assessments, pass their assessments. And then when they were going to do a second cohort, those people went out and talked to all their friends and all their family and said, this is such a great program, you have to come. You can do it in Spanish. And so then the second cohort, they actually had to turn people away because they had so much interest. And the library itself hadn't done anything differently in terms of promoting. It was the students who were promoting it. So also, something you can let people know, like, hey, if you enjoyed this, tell your friends and your family and your neighbors to come too. But that can be a really good way to talk to trusted community members that libraries are a place of community and the center of communities a lot of times. And there's other organizations that can do that as well. Great. I also saw a comment about colorful, creative paper ads help too. I mean, I think that's really important to recognize that people with low digital literacy skills aren't going to find it on the internet or on your library webpage. So you have to think about where could we advertise within the library for sure, but maybe again, oh, I was talking to one of my coworkers who's planning an event, and she said, well, I know there's a Jimmy John's right next to where we're going to hold this event that a lot of people go to, and they let you put up a flyer on the bulletin board. So, you know, kind of thinking about your community, where might be whatever your population you might be hoping to get more people from, where might they go? And having those ads there. And again, I know that resources and time are limited, so you have to pick and choose what you're going to do. But I think sometimes as we kind of brainstorm these things and think about them, even if they aren't possible now with the time and resources you have, it helps us be open to those opportunities when they do come by. So you may think, well, I can't do this now, but then maybe someone, you know, in the community says, hey, I know about this, and they'd be willing to help, or you have volunteers at the library who'd help, or something just comes together where you thought about it already, and then when you hear it, you think, hey, this could be an easy way for us to do this that isn't going to require as much time and energy as I thought. So I always encourage brainstorming and thinking about possibilities, and then, you know, seizing the moment when you can, and not feeling bad if you can't. But I think that has definitely helped us at North Star to, we're always brainstorming about, well, wouldn't it be great if we could do this or this or this, and then sometimes miraculously the money comes through or the time comes through. So any last thoughts that you have about how to keep people persisting, or something that's like burning in your mind? Let's see. So in the chat, we ask attendees to complete an evaluation form after a training session, and then we try to adjust future trainings accordingly. That's a great, so I do, yeah, thank you for pointing that out. Pivoting based on feedback is really important. And, you know, whether it be one person's, you have to take some things into, you know, account, whereas sometimes people are just not going to be happy no matter what you do. And, you know, so if you're hearing something once from someone who seems, you know, unhappy, good to pay attention to it, but maybe not make a change until you're hearing it several times. So just remember that, you know, some people, I don't know, they might not like the way you present something, but maybe a majority of the people do. So kind of keeping that balance in mind. Right. Can't please all the people all the time. And being responsive to feedback is really important. And learning from just from what you've seen too, like what worked in this case, what worked. So you can have at your disposal a wide variety of options. So if something's not working for one person, maybe this second approach will work. Yeah. And of course, a lot of time, like at North Star, we get suggestions all the time, and we can't do all of them at once, but we do like write them down and keep track of them. And a lot of these suggestions are really great because they're from people who are actually experiencing North Star and using it on a daily basis. Same thing with the learners that you're working with. They're the ones who are learning the material. And so if they're giving you ideas or pointers on how things could be better, it's helpful for us to see that from their perspective, whereas we might kind of forget. Okay, any other if you had to share with someone who was day one doing this work, any advice you'd give them for helping keep people coming?
I would say slow down. um, and consider that, like, I guess every step of the process is a opportunity to teach. And I think one of our prior sessions with you, Teresa, we talked about how, like, even before we even open up North Star, like, there's already an opportunity to teach some literacy skills, because like, there's a bunch of stuff we have to do before we even get to North Star, right? So remembering to kind of slow down and look at those opportunities to, you know, perhaps transfer some skills.
Okay, I think that if you take away anything from this whole talk, the word slow down would be what I'd ask you to take away, because I think that's really, really important and relevant. You don't have, it's not about winning. It's not about even getting the assessments. It's about meeting the person where they're at and the needs they have. And so I think that expression slow down is, you should all put it above your desks. Because especially in our culture, the culture itself is driven to produce and to succeed, and so we sometimes all get in that mindset, and that doesn't really help anyone in this situation necessarily. So thank you. I think we should just end it with that. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, it's been really fun to talk to all of you today. Thank you so much for this back and forth. I really enjoyed it. I hope that it was helpful. Andrea does have a survey in the chat. And I look forward to talking to you next time. Andrea, do you have
Thank you.
anything you want to say?
So they're doing elevator work, and so I apologize for any background noise. It just started like 10 minutes ago again. So thank you everyone for being here. As I said before, this was recorded. All the recordings will be posted, and I'll also email them out so that you have the link. We also have a monthly North Star user group. We meet on the third Thursday of every month at 2 o'clock. And it's not just North Star. You can bring any kind of questions, updates, anything to those. It's completely run by the attendees who are there, and I try to make sure that you get what you want to get out of that time. So I'll make sure to include that information as well. And thank you so much for being here. Thank you for participating. It was great to learn from all of you, and thank you. Have a great rest of your week and a great rest of your day. And thank you,
Thank you.
Teresa. This is
You're
wonderful.
welcome. You're welcome.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.